Welcome to CGI Voices, where CGI's experts share insights on the latest in federal government management, policy, and technology. I'm your host, Pete Tseronis. We're here today with Dr. Mark Flugge, Sustainability and Climate Change Lead at CGI. Good to see you again, Mark.
Good to see you, Pete.
Super excited to chat today. We have a lot to cover, but hopefully it'll be a snippet. There'll be some bits, bytes, and insights for our audience to find not only interest, but knowledge in what we're going to talk about, because it's a topic that's very complex, but there's such an opportunity. And in the federal government and in industry, climate is something that people are still wrapping their head around. I think you would agree, and we've talked about this in the past. But it's going to be fun, and let's enjoy this. But let me brag about you just for a little bit for our audience. More than 15 years experience advising global organizations and federal agencies across the climate agenda. You've advised the World Bank, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the EPA, the USAID, the USDA. You are a man in demand. You are from the University of Oxford, where you have your Doctor of Philosophy and Master's degree, which is awfully impressive. And I think we're going to start off with you talking a little bit about that journey, what brought you here, and why you're so passionate about this topic.
Great. Thanks for the introduction. I forgot I'd done some of those things, so that's great to have that reminder. Yes, I've bounced around. Academia, think tanks, the World Bank, but I spent the core of my time in government contracting. So as you say, advising EPA, USDA, USAID, and other agencies. But kind of what led me here is I really think addressing climate change is everybody's responsibility. And I came to that conclusion. My doctorate, as you say, was in atmospheric chemistry. I worked in a lab flowing ozone-depleting gases with ozone and doing a lot of ozone-related fundamental chemistry research, but the lab wouldn't let you do those semi-dangerous experiments at weekends. So I was a hiker, a mountaineer, a rock climber. I'd be out in the wilds of the UK every weekend. And then as I did my kind of ozone-related research, the same journal would be, how industry came together to solve the ozone layer. Can they do the same for climate? It was all climate change, climate change, climate change. So I rapidly realized during my doctorate that really climate change was the central environmental issue that the world had to tackle next. Being a passionate kind of out in the wilds, in the environment, I already saw changes in the environment I was visiting every weekend. You go to the Alps, you're seeing glaciers recede at record rates, and it's only getting faster each year. You read that research, and it really let me know that I wanted to work on climate change. And after I moved to the USA, I started to find opportunities to work on climate change.
Well, that pedigree speaks for itself, and anybody who Googles you will see that not only have you studied it, but it is something I know that you bring obviously to CGI, but having heard you speak inside of the Beltway and outside, it's clearly a passion of yours. And for our audience, we talk today a lot about what is climate change, the crisis. And I always like to think of what happened, last week or the week prior or last year, where we've had environmental impact. In the Washington area, we had what appeared to be like the feeling of being on another planet when we had wildfires in Canada, which ultimately impacted parts of the East Coast. And it's just amazing the power of climate. But with technology and with people and with the opportunity to improve process, people, process, technology will be a theme today. I think we will be able to delve into some of how CGI is addressing each of those legs of that stool. So sneak preview, we will discuss impact. And Mark, we're looking forward to some of that perspective, because it's not just about the technology, it is about the process and the people. But to set the stage again, folks, in Washington, D.C., inside the Beltway and beyond, mitigating climate change, ensuring long-term viability of humanity and those ecosystems, supporting humanity, and meeting the present generation needs without compromising future generations will be themes that Mark and I address today. Climate change is a local, national, and global challenge. It affects our health, our well-being, and the critical infrastructure, as well as our future generations. The World Health Organization has underscored that climate change is the single biggest health threat facing humanity, affecting social and environmental determinants of health, to include clean air, safe drinking water, sufficient food, and secure shelter. Mark, back to you. I think that's something I care about personally. These are the things we depend on every day, the very critical sectors, and obviously how government industry work together with companies like yours to make it a better future for our generation is what the end goal or end game is. There is no shortage of executive orders, folks, from 14008 to the climate adaptation plans to 14057, a staple, as well as the infrastructure law, bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and of course the CHIPS and Science Act. So lots of homework for our audience to read about as we jump right in. So Mark, people, process, and technology. Let's get this going with a question. What have you seen in government recently that tells you or conveys to you sustainability and climate are top priorities?
So there's, as you say, there's a lot going on in government now, but I just want to go back to something you said earlier. This is probably climate change is one of the largest impacts on the world's health, but it's also going to be an impact on our economies if we don't change the path we're on. It's also going to be a real impact on our societies, both, the vulnerable people in our communities that suffer most from climate impacts, but also have the least investment, those environmental justice issues. It's going to change what immigration looks like on our borders. At the moment, we've kind of got people migrating out of fear for the crime in the areas where they live, also for, socioeconomic reasons. But as these climate impacts hit our most vulnerable, we're starting to see climate immigration showing up at our borders and around the world. So this is the fundamental issue of our time. There are many important issues, but the good thing about climate change is the government has so much influence and control over what it can do to address climate change. And you touched on a lot of the things it's trying to do in terms of reducing its own emissions. So there is this legislation, there are these executive orders, and there are these policy initiatives. So, yeah, I'm really impressed that there's money now in the legislation, in the bipartisan infrastructure law, in the Inflation Reduction Act, real pots of millions of dollars to go serve those underserved communities, do community climate projects. There's executive orders around federal sustainability. We have to do our part as individuals. CGI and other contractors do our part as companies and organizations, and the federal government needs to do its part to lower its emissions.
Yeah, I'm going to highlight a couple, and I appreciate you bringing up what I think is one of the most important elements, and you hit on humanity, the economy and society, but equity.
Yes.
Environmental justice, another term that the Washington, D.C. area and beyond better get familiar with because it exists. Not everybody has what the creature comforts are a lot here on the East Coast and some of our major cities. But to your point, Mark, I appreciate you bringing this up. I mean, there's real money. June 20th, Biden-Harris administration announces nearly $1 billion through its Investing in America agenda to make federal buildings cleaner and more efficient, supporting thousands of clean energy jobs. June 9th, $30 million to advance American-made clean energy technologies. Real money solving real problems. So it happens every day, and for this community that's looking for where's the money, it's there. And I think it's the next phase, which I'm looking to get some feedback here from you on, is how do you align a company's capabilities to that people, process, technology conundrum in many cases. So you mentioned earlier a lot of change happening. The White House Council on Environmental Quality has the Office of the Federal Chief Sustainability Officer with certain agencies. I think last count, there was about 50 of these in government. What's that been like with you as you're building those partnerships with government to engage with those types of influencers?
Yeah, I spend kind of every working day kind of tracking what initiatives are going on in the government, speaking to people from CEQ, speaking to the chief sustainability officers from agencies. So I'm getting to see this picture emerge. It's great that we have a federal sustainability plan. This was Gina McCarthy's kind of parting achievement. She brought the agency heads together, and they have the climate change task force at the top of government level, established the Office of the Federal Chief Sustainability Officer, Andrew Mayock. He's been great at coordinating, bringing in experts into that office, run out of the CEQ to help provide guidance and put agencies on the right track. The Federal Sustainability Plan has great ambitious goals to drive, the whole of government towards really halving emissions by 2030 and getting us to net zero emissions by 2050. And I'm sure we'll come back on those targets because that is a paradigm shift. That is going from incremental step changes to having to achieve something which is massive in a relatively short amount of time. Sounds like a long amount of time, but it's like saving for retirement. Anything you can do today, next week, next month really adds up quickly.
So let's come back to that relationship, and from the top, the CEQ, in the executive office of the president, starting with an ambassador, if you will, of this challenge, climate change, and I want to hit on just to summarize. You talked about it's happening, and then it must trickle down to the agencies, right? We all know inside of Washington D.C. that eventually there are requirements put on agencies to meet certain goals, and Mark, some that I keep coming back to are that, with the three pieces of legislation, that were passed in late 2021 or started to be, it was about improving U.S. economic competitiveness, innovation, industrial productivity, the infrastructure law, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, introduced $2 trillion in new federal spending over the next 10 years. And you mentioned those goals of 40% below 2005 levels in 2030 is where we want to get the greenhouse gas emission reduction. Folks, these are goals that, I hope I'm around, but we're talking about the future. And I think having those goals and those objectives and starting with these sustainability officers gives you a place to go have a conversation with somebody to build that partnership. So awesome stuff there. So let's talk about the role. There's always a chief something popping up in government, right? Sustainability officers, what do you feel that role needs to be successful?
Yeah, so the Federal Sustainability Plan, so it came out of the Executive Order 14057, as you mentioned, requires each major agency and even some of the smaller contributing agencies to have a chief sustainability officer. So already you've got a new CSO role. Not to be confused with chief security officer. As you say, there's lots of C-suite in government. One thing that I found is that person and that role is different at every agency, and not really by design. It's not tailored to fit the agency, but rather they've reached out and found somebody at the agency that is in a good position at that agency to fulfill that role. It is a new role, but it's not really a new person. It's another responsibility that's been put onto usually an existing person in government.
And other duties as assigned, which is usually the case, which is not always a bad thing, but how do you do that? Multitasking, we both have discussed, is not necessarily a quality you want to say you're great at, but keep going.
Yeah, so that kind of has created a need around that person taking ownership of sustainability and not thinking, I'll get to that when I need to. Again, it's an executive order, so there's lots of money around the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. But as we know, a lot of executive orders are a little bit of an unfunded mandate. So it's going to be really important to go from the federal sustainability plan to something more detailed and find the funding, the resources, the people. The people piece you talk about, that CSO really needs to connect with the right people at their agency and then work really closely with the rest of the C-suite to put a detailed plan in place and put funding in place.
So the show me a person without a plan, I'll show you a person who plans to fail is true to form here. And I 100% agree. I served 25 years in government, and a lot of that hierarchical, here's what we want to do, the administration, fairly transient, right, over time. It's still a goal, and let's be clear, climate is not something that is partisan. It's a bipartisan topic, and I appreciate you emphasizing that building, selling into the government, collaborating with the government, building the partnership with, in this case, a sustainability officer. Yes, maybe it's CEQ, but you have to do it at the agency, which it might be the CIO's responsibility, right? The procurement officer's responsibility.
They need that. Yeah, you're right. They need that cooperation. Even in the Federal Sustainability Plan, it's mandated that the CSO will work with the CFO, will work with the CIO to get what they need to kind of implement their sustainability plans. But I think more than that, it's really important for the CSO to be a champion for sustainability at their agency and really understand what sustainability means at their agency. Is kind of addressing climate change and sustainability a core part of the mission at an agency like EPA? So they have more levers to pull, they have more they can do? Or is it really something that's not part of the daily operations at an agency? Those agencies are in a bit more of a wait and see type of attitude and really need the more guidance that's going to come out of CEQ and more guidance that's going to come out of OMB. That guidance needs to come quickly, it needs to be clear, it needs to be tailored for the CSOs, and it doesn't really need to just to be a list of things to do. It needs to be detailed guidance that a CSO who isn't an expert in sustainability or corporate sustainability or federal sustainability or building operations or fleet management can really take that detailed guidance and actually make a difference at their agency.
So you answered my next question, which is this varying, disparate mission of government. I think at last count, if you go to the Federal Register, there's 434 agencies,
right,
thereabouts. They all have a unique mission. I'm not even violent, but I'm in full agreement with you that if anybody reads a federal budget or an appropriation that leads to a federal budget, the word climate is somewhere in there in terms of an objective, whether you're the Defense Department, the EPA. People associate energy, EPA, with, they're the climate, organization. No, everybody needs power. Power is produced by electricity, oil, natural gas, hydro, whatever, and that can create a situation where we have to worry about our air and our drinking water and the planes, trains, and automobiles. So thank you for emphasizing that, and I would challenge anybody to think that climate is a specific mission with a specific agency. It's touching all of them. Okay, so we're gonna pivot into a bit of the people, process, technology, but before we go into that segment, second part of our discussion, can you just rehash one more time, where do you feel right now, in light of climate being a bit of a movement, but something people are wrapping their heads around, both on the government and the industry side, with priorities? Is it about the emissions? Is it about sustainable operations? There's this triangulation, if you will, this transformational change you're seeing in the agencies that are rallying around climate because they need technology, services, and solutions that CGI can provide?
Yeah, I think each of the agency has a blueprint, not really a blueprint, but has the federal sustainability plan so that each agency knows what it needs to do. And then some agencies have been really successful in moving their own mission forward and including sustainability. So I'm thinking about GSA. GSA has been a real leader on moving the sustainability agenda forward. They have rules around low emission concrete, low emission asphalt and glass for new construction buildings. They have the high performance green building program. They have a lot of initiatives, a lot of policy initiatives in the field. So they're real leaders and laggards across the different agencies. And what's been really exciting is where there are leaders, that can be replicated across the agencies. Where there's some agencies are kind of triangulating. We're just trying to understand the federal sustainability plan. We're putting out our sustainability plan that's telling you what we've done to date, but is not telling people where they need to go next.
The sustainability.gov website you turned me onto a few times in certain sections. All the information's there, the adaptation plans, and you can see the progress agencies are making. So if you, again, work with government, sell into government, the answers, as I like to say, are hidden in plain view when it comes to meeting those requirements. Let's bring it down now, because we are inside of the Beltway,
Yep.
and we know that there are agencies that have unique, as you pointed out earlier, missions. No mission is the same. Yes, they need technology. Technology's not the problem. Managing data, governing data, curating data. What do we do with all that data in today's day and age, where there's the volumes of it, in a manner that we have in the cloud, and making sense of it and finding those needles in the haystack? And then, the conversations that need to happen between government and industry can always be improved. But let's take it down. Have you had some experience sitting down with some agencies and their unique mission, and how they're seeing and viewing and interpreting the guidance coming out of the White House?
Yes. So I've met CSOs at some of our events. We've both been at those events inside the Beltway where industry is talking to government. We had the Act Climate Change Summit, and I moderated a panel. We had CSOs on the panel, so we were getting an insight into what's it mean to be a Chief Sustainability Officer at Commerce. What's it to be the longest-serving Chief Sustainability Officer in the government at GSA?
Kevin Kamsher, yep. The godfather of sustainability.
Absolutely.
I like to call him.
And then during these conversations, I'm hearing, well, there needs to be more cooperation between the agencies. There needs to be more collaboration within an agency so that CSO, so that person can, get on with championing the process that needs to happen within an agency.
Have you been able to find in some of those conversations with a sustainability officer or a chief financial officer? I mean, you talk to the C-suite as you've shared, that climate is something folks are starting to realize. Hey, there are metrics associated with buildings, to cars, to the defense industrial base. Having the sustainability officer who's fluent in this topic is a value add to somebody like you who is, got a pedigree, if you will, and a background in it. But how are you seeing those other C-suite folks really embracing, hey, this is a little bit of a business thing as much as is a technology thing?
Yeah, I do see the C-suite getting on board. As you said, it changes from agency to agency. When you look at the OMB scorecards on emission reductions at an agency, actually those agencies that are doing better have something more than the federal sustainability plan in place. They have a bit more of a detailed sustainability plan. And actually there's two agencies that stand out to me. Customs and Border Protection actually have a green trade strategy. This is how can CPB influence even outside our borders? What can we do across the globe where we interact with international shipping, where we interact with ports as they protect our borders? How can they address climate change and be more sustainable? And the other great agency that has great insights is the State Department. The State Department have a green diplomacy initiative. So we have solar panels and wind power at a number of our embassy sites around the world. There's a long-established sustainability effort around buildings, their fleet, that's been going on before this administration updated the federal sustainability plan. So there's a lot of good examples within government, but I would like to see more of this sharing of success stories, more kind of cooperation within the C-suite and more kind of collaboration between agencies.
Yeah, as a former Fed, as a CTO, Chief Technology Officer, I used to call myself the connective tissue officer because I was trying to bring people together back then and even and today, and that's a challenge. It's getting a financial or a privacy officer or a data officer together to say, hey, I kind of see how I fit into this climate agenda. I think folks like yourself and obviously CGI are doing that. You are connective tissue as well. And that I say that to you and keep doing it. I mean, have those conversations. You will bring people together, whether you realize it or not. And as you kind of hit on this, and we talked about it earlier, about this people, process, and technology, the harmonious alignment. How do you continuously improve? Well, you continuously improve by making sure that the organizational culture, the people understand the role of climate in their unique mission, right? We're talking about the federal government here. It's not for profit. Government is saying, hey, this is a thing, climate change. We need technology. We need better processes, and you bring that, CGI, and then, of course, that people component I think you've hit on. So for our audience, let's talk about this from a climate change perspective. So I'm going to say a few things and then be prepared to riff, right? You mentioned a few awesome programs at DHS, at State Department, raising awareness, promoting sustainable behaviors, educating the public. That, to me, I align with, if you will, how it's a people thing, right? Teaching, educating, and then maybe you can talk a little bit about each of these and how CGI is helping that simply by going into the agencies, Mark. 2, process, adopting eco-friendly practices, reducing greenhouse gas, optimizing supply chain, reducing waste and energy consumption. Technology, dashboards can help us with that. I know you do that at CGI with solutions and services. And then lastly, hey folks, technology, think smart grid, energy efficient buildings, precision alcohol. Hey, that's interesting. Precision agriculture. I think they do that now with certain types of alcohol. Artificial intelligence and data analytics. Now that's a mouthful, but that's a people process technology stool around climate. How is CGI continuously working to help bring those services, technologies, and the bringing people together element each and every day?
Yeah. So I suppose even though my day-to-day is interacting with federal agencies and these chief sustainability officers and trying to get them, now they have that person, to having a detailed roadmap so they can be successful at sustainability at their agency, a lot of the rest of my time is spent helping CGI on our own corporate sustainability journey. So I work with our facilities groups. We're trying to roll out renewable energy across all our offices, just like the agencies need to do across all their facilities.
Practice what you preach,
Yes.
right? You're doing it. Go ahead.
Yes. So I touch on this every day. So I have an understanding of what the agency needs to do themselves. But fortunately, I come from a background and a subject matter expertise in this, whereas some of the chief sustainability officers might not have that. But they have a head of fleet. They have a head of buildings. So we can really take lessons we know from corporate sustainability and our understanding of federal government and really tailor what are best practices in the corporate space, which might not be directly applicable to the federal space, but tailor those practices and help agencies do the same thing we're doing at a corporate level.
How has that been received? Because I love that. I used to say, give me an example in your commercial practice where you're using the cloud or using AI or mitigating cyber risk. Is that a conversation that is being received, or are agencies like, hey man, that's the corporate side of we're government? Or are you finding that those use cases and the experience you have, and again, I applaud CGI for having this roadmap and continuous evolution towards a climate agenda issues and matters. Are you finding that agencies are receptive to, well, if you did it there, come show us how to do it here?
They are receptive. I think there is a modernization movement across government. There's digitization, right? There's migration to the cloud. These are all important things that agencies do in their different programs where they're managing large amounts of data. But for sustainability and measuring, carbon footprints and greenhouse gas emissions, the federal government is still passing around spreadsheets. They're well-made spreadsheets, they're sophisticated spreadsheets. But all the data the agencies need to report out on their emissions is there. There are more modern ways of doing it. I think agencies are receptive to doing it in the right way, being accurate, being transparent, reporting out. But each agency already has all of its data, and I think there's things they could be doing now while they wait for guidance from CEQ and OMB, where they can be moving forward with their own data, getting an understanding of how can we get our arms around our own sustainability journey. I think it's really important to measure them, get the metrics, and once you have the metrics, you can manage what you need to do at the agency level.
So I'm not intending to throw a hardball at you here. It's a softball because I know you can answer this. You've teed it up. You used words like modernization, digitization, transformation. The government is bullish on cloud and AI and IoT. And to me, in a world where if we really are embracing a zero trust environment where you trust nothing and have all these devices connected, how do you manage the data? How do you turn data into information? So you mentioned spreadsheets. Hey, they're not going away,
No.
but they're there. Here's the question. What are some maybe capabilities, not so much technologies, because you at CGI have a broad swath of knowledge of what's out there. There are tools that are retrofitted, but there's no silver bullet, right? I think you and I agree. There's no one solution. Come in and there's your dashboard and you're good to go. What are some of these capabilities, these technical capabilities that CGI brings to bear, in addition to obviously the expertise of its people?
Yeah, so even around a small issue, which might be data management around your greenhouse gas activity data, so your electricity use, your water use, your fuel use. These are asked by the Federal Energy Management Program, managed out of DOE.
FEMP, also known as FEMP, right?
Yep, to report that every year, annually. Each major agency has to do that. So each agency has this data, but they're giving it to a different organization who is estimating the emissions for it, and it goes into the OMB scorecard. So really that disconnect with somebody's own data, their ability to see their data rather than once a year, see the results, see it on a dashboard, be able to manage against it. And these are not doing a greenhouse gas inventory, doing your carbon footprint is not a difficult thing to do if you know how. And most of the agency themselves don't know how. That's where, contractors can help, FEMP can help, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol can help. But we can bring that data together. There are software as a service solutions around doing carbon footprints at agencies. There are even software platforms that will automatically email the head of a building to say, what was your energy use this quarter? It doesn't even have to be a person remembering to remind themselves to send that email.
So
they're centralized. Yes.
Yeah, I like to call that actionable or applied intelligence being served up to an individual who's responsible for what does that data mean?
Yes.
And I didn't mean to cut you off because you had me already thinking about 5 questions, but I will spare that because we could talk for hours. So that leads to something that I want the audience, I hope, to be getting out of today is the government's doing its part. Guidance, OMB, heck, go to the Hill, like pushing down this matters. Climate, back to the discussion. Climate and sustainability, they're a thing. Humanity's at risk. Life is at risk. Hurricanes. Think of these acts of God or these environmental tornadoes, wildfires. People die. You talk about data. We have more data than we sometimes can distill. But if the government's seemingly doing its part, saying this matters, these are the executive orders, this is where we need help, do you find that they can do more? Or do you feel now it's time for industry to step up? Or is it more like I say, a conversation that needs to happen about how can we deal with less of a buy-sell, but more of a seek-solve, opportunity. Buying and selling, it's a transaction. Buy our tool, buy our services, we'll help you, and we'll write white papers. No, I know that's not what you do. You're about what problem are you trying to solve, and let us help you because we've got an incredible organization here who cares about humanity, society, the economy, and equity. So speak to that, what can be done on both sides, government and industry, to maybe move the needle.
Yeah, I think that industry, government cooperation and collaboration is really important. I think to our own sustainability journey here at CGI, we're a IT integrator, we create technology, we program our own software, we could do our internal sustainability journey ourselves, right? Our data, our greenhouse gas emissions, our carbon footprint. Yet we know what we're really good at, and we might know where somebody else might be better at it. So we seek outside solutions ourselves, even though we could do it all in-house.
This is your partnership, channels and value chains. Yes. Keep going.
So I think at the moment, as the government kind of triangulates around the federal sustainability plan, they're probably trying to do too much themselves, too much internally. So that's where these kind of industry, government collaborations, we were at the IACT Climate Change Summit together. Great conversations about the need for technology to support this sustainability journey. Great conversations around, technology itself has a massive carbon footprint. The cloud is actually down on the ground in data centers that are massive energy users, and those buildings need to be designed for efficiency and optimization and not to be giant, electricity sucks. So these conversations are important, but I would kind of encourage the government to seek the right places for input, to maybe have the chief sustainability officers come together more often than they do, have a platform where they can come together and hear from industry. There's been various advisory boards out of some of the agencies to try and see, well, what policies need to be put in place. I think maybe agencies can step outside of their traditional structure of rulemaking, having an advisory board, waiting to see what that advisory board comes back with, to be a bit more proactive and actually, reach out to industry in parallel to these advisory boards and these rulemakings.
So let's flip the switch, right? The government intentions are policy, there's regulation. Look, coming from a former executive, there's a lot we have to handle. I always challenge people, until you've worked in government, especially at the agency level, it's tough to meet requirements from what could be a very transient administration from every 4 years, right? But there's industries saying, look, we're reading the same guidance. Their dashboards, you're giving us the information. We're trying to have these conversations with you, but we got to move the needle. So I heard two things, or one thing that you just came out with. Government could potentially do a more optimal, or provide a more optimal conduit for that conversation to happen, while they're also trying to actually pilot a few things or take advantage of what industry and CGI has to offer. What could industry do better? I mean, right? Nobody's perfect. What given the effort the government is trying to do to move its needle, right? It's a slow burn. What could industry be doing better to make it so that conversation, that collaborative conversation, really happens?
Yes, I think industry could do a lot better at meeting agencies where they are today on their sustainability journey, and understanding that, even though the goals are the same, reducing emissions, being more resource efficient, incorporating environmental justice considerations, and also understanding the agency mission in all of this, supporting the agency mission while you make your operations more sustainable. These are real priorities and things that the agency can't ignore as they go on their sustainability journey. I see a lot of, we have a corporate sustainability solution that might work for a Fortune 500 company. I see industry trying to sell that directly into federal agencies without understanding the agency's challenges or tailoring their services to what the agency needs.
I love that. I call that the do your homework.
Yes.
Go understand the mission, and don't try to retrofit something, but malleable comes to mind. I always like to think of jigsaw puzzles. You can kind of force a piece in, but when you're done looking at it, it's like, that's not the right piece. So yes. I love that. So shout out to you, Mark, for bringing that up. That really speaks to me as if we're still in government. All right, look, let's do the vision part, and then we'll hit the parting shots. Give us, just a sense of what we've talked about today. I mean, very complex, very high level: climate change, climate crisis, people, process, technology. What's the future look like, as a human being?
I think what's really important is individuals, companies, the federal government, all doing their part. And so we have this federal sustainability plan now at agencies. We need to execute against that plan. I think government needs to understand scale and try and move beyond making incremental improvements. Have the pilots, yes, but quickly look for solutions that can scale. In the same way, an individual can recycle. If the county isn't picking up their recycling, an individual recycling doesn't work. You need everything operating at scale. The science, has already dictated where we need to be. We do need to halve our emissions by 2030. They need to drive down to net zero by 2050. So the administration also needs to think about, this can't go away with a change of administration. This can't go away with a change of leadership at an agency. We need to kind of think about, how can we future-proof our policies? How can we protect our bills and laws against legal challenges? How can we set up for success now? Because 2030 isn't that far away. When you think about agency budgets needing to, you already need to think about next year's budget today. And if you're making capital investments to bring in electric vehicles, green buildings, drive to net zero in procurement and acquisitions, I think this is the phase to have detailed roadmaps and really drive success. If we do that, I'm very optimistic. I've been working on climate change, as you say, for 15 plus years. I think I am an optimist by nature. I've seen some of these challenges, I've seen a lot of these challenges surmounted by, smart people, real champions at agencies, great contractor support from companies like CGI.
It's a
the
passion.
Government can do this.
It's
yes.
a passion
The
of
government,
yours.
The government can do this. They just need to look for help, look for help from industry, look for help by working internally, and really execute against the good federal sustainability plan they already have.
Well, I loved it. I think that was a combination of amazing parting shots and optimism and painting that picture because it's worth 1,000 words. And I'll just close out with, you've educated me, you've informed me, you've enlightened me as a resident. But I want to thank you for that. I know you're a passionate cat. I know you care about this, and it comes out when you're doing that teaching. You're a teacher.
Yeah.
So
well, thank you, Pete. I'm always encouraged. We're both at the same events. We're both at climate change summits. We're out there helping government do this. So I'm thank you for those kind words, and I'm really glad I'm out there. Really glad you're out there. I'm really glad like-minded people are out there in the government as well.
Keep being a trailblazer, you and CGI. Good seeing you, buddy.
Great to see you, Pete. Thank you.
You can find CGI Voices on your preferred podcast platform or watch the video version on YouTube. Subscribe or follow and spread the word to your colleagues. CGI Voices, expert insights for federal decision makers.